Welcome to the third episode of the Fantasy Trail. I'm Matt with,
JT.
This is Mike here.
and this is the episode you guys have been waiting for,
Dying.
clamoring for. The
Clamoring.
initial power rankings. We've had
Initial
the draft, and now we're going to see how exactly everyone did.
All right, so I got a little news first. And the sad part that I've seen is that all of the features last year where you could send like trash talk through the site, where you'd send those little videos and stuff, and where it actually allowed you to do the power rankings, gone.
So this is our only forum.
So this may be our only forum. So this may have worked out good that we decided to do this anyways, but it may have to become a weekly thing where we do the rankings on here when we discuss. But sadly, it does not seem like the site has it anymore.
It's kind of sad. I enjoyed it each week.
Yeah, I did too. So we'll see. So the way we're going to roll tonight is that yours truly has gone ahead and done a completely non-biased, 100% legit rankings of the 12 teams in our league. And I want to give each of you guys a chance to discuss and either revel in my brilliance or insult my idiocy.
It'll be the latter.
There it is. All right. One caveat before we begin as well. The other thing on my mind was I looked at this strictly from this moment right now. So I was analyzing each team going into their week one matchup. I'm not looking at past performance. I was not looking at the potential for future.
Wait. What past performance? Are you talking about like week 4 of the preseason?
Well,
I'm
what
talking
about
about
the player
owners.
who's suspended now?
Okay.
For instance,
Or that, yeah. Player past performance.
coming in 3 weeks.
Right.
But
So-
this week, how does he rank?
Exactly.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of volatility in these first couple weeks, and especially for the lower teams. Don't fret.
Just
So
to
here we go.
clarify, last year JT had me at number 1 on week 1.
Who had you number 1?
You did.
Well, last year.
Yes, that's what I mean. My mistake. Last
Okay.
year I was number 1 on week 1, and that was a poor analysis.
I think it did great if my reverse jinx was in place. All right, guys. So here we go. Starting things off, working our way back from 12. My number 12 ranking is Angela. While she's got a couple stars, I see a severe lack of running back depth. There was very minimal running backs that I'm seeing appear, period. And even a couple of those on the bench, I'm not sure are going to play at all. And Dez takes a major hit with Romo going out. I mean, maybe Prescott works out with him, but the concussion and that could be difficult. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to disagree with you. I think Murray running behind that Oakland line, which is probably going to be the best offensive line in football, I think he's in for a monster season.
Okay, but look beyond that. Those other running backs are rough.
Chris Ivory, I mean, you out of anyone should know all about Chris Ivory. You rode the Ivory train last year.
I did, but he wasn't also splitting carries with TJ Yeldon.
Yeah, he's going to be the goal line back. He's going to – I had Yeldon. He did not impress me. I think Ivory is just going to take it into the goal line so much. And honestly, she probably has, I'm going to say, 2 top 5 quarterbacks on her team with Rodgers and Manning.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, though, that her second running back being Ryan Matthews, I feel if any player who I've ever seen as far as having fantasy hype to have never lived up to it, but for some reason still sticks around every year, it's got to be him. He's never paid
Reggie
off.
Bush?
I'll say this. In a PPR league, there were years where Reggie Bush caught maybe 90 passes. Ryan Matthews, since his draft day in San Diego, has honestly done nothing, but still seems to fool people, and I don't know where this comes from.
No, no. Okay, I'm an Eagles fan. Matthews will have a good year if he can stay healthy. He won't stay healthy, but the games where he plays, he'll have great games.
All right. So there's a lot of
Um,
potential there for Angela. It could turn out a lot better than what I'm seeing right now. But let's go on to number 11. Number 11 for me was Michael. Michael took a great deal of risk in the draft by drafting a couple of suspended players. I believe he's got Bell, which is obviously going to change every bit of his team because that's the addition of a number 1 pick. But as of right now, without that future potential, he's hurting a little bit, and at least for those first couple weeks, he just needs to weather the storm. What do you think?
You know, if he could pull out one win with Bell coming back and Bell produces like he did a few years ago, I could argue that he has one of the best backfields in the league.
Fair.
Um,
If he could pull out one win out of the 3.
Yep.
Yeah, the pickup of Deion Lewis, especially since he's out for
8.
6 weeks, that was kind of surprising. And the Shane Vereen, I know when he picked Vereen, the pickings were slim. But between that and then Danny Woodhead, who's been a workhorse for San Diego, but having him on my team in the past, you always kind of wonder about him.
Yeah, sure.
I agree. And whether Demaryius can pay off again is also going to be in question. I know Peyton Manning didn't have a great year last year statistically by any means, but he managed to feed Demaryius the ball. Whether that happens with Paxton Lynch or not at this point, I think that's a little bit up in the air.
Isn't it Semien or whatever at quarterback?
It might be Semien now. I've heard
It is.
it is Semien now.
I'm sure
Okay,
I'm not even saying his name right.
I honestly, I think anyone on the Broncos is kind of
A risk.
tossed up at this point.
I agree.
All right. Well, that brings us to the final one in the grouping of the last grouping, and that would be Casey for me coming in at number 10.
Well, because he didn't auto draft this year.
Maybe, but in the end, I see a major question mark at his running backs. I see a QB risk because Carson Palmer is approximately 48 years old, and his backup is Dak Prescott. And I mean, as the winner last year, I think he's got a lot to live up to, and I'm not fully convinced that that's going to do it.
This is true. I mean, I do like Elliott. I think he's in line for a monster year. Again, more so because of the offensive line than the team itself. Yeah, but really there's very little depth. I don't think Murray's not even the best running back on the team. And I think he'll start for maybe a week or two, and then he'll get pushed back.
Replaced by Henry.
Yeah. Now, his receivers, with Marshall, Benjamin Baldwin, and Travis Benjamin, who no one's really talking about, I think they have the ability to do something amazing. They could also be big-time disappointments. I love the fact that he has Bruce Ellington on his bench, who's been ruled out for the year.
I think that's a good pick. You got to stash people sometimes.
I wonder how long he'll actually be on his team. That'll be interesting to see.
And I could also say, go ahead, Matt.
I'm going to just say over under week 3. You go, Mike.
I can't describe to you the level of disappointment everyone has to have in DeMarco Murray. It's again one of these situations where the year was so bad last year. He cost me 2 of my fantasy leagues. I'm not forgiving him, nor will I ever. And I think he'll continue to be a disappointment. I feel he ran behind the best offensive line in football. It was a one-cut running back and was successful because of it. As far as him going into any other scheme at all, I don't buy it.
Okay. Well, that is
There-
You
I mean,
can't
okay,
argue
so
when you're dealing with him.
he has Palmer as his starting quarterback, and he picked up Prescott as his backup. Do you guys have any issue with Palmer staying healthy? I mean, he's gotten kind of
Yes.
banged up.
I certainly could. Is he 36? I'm not 100%.
37, struggled to stay healthy last year. That's what cost him the playoffs. I mean, he got hurt when he messed up his thumb. He's
And
not
you
as
may as
mobile.
well take Sanchez on the handcuff at this point.
Man, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. So we'll see. You know, obviously he proved us wrong last year by winning the league. So we could be proven wrong again. Sliding into number 9, we have in my rankings Rachel coming in with number 9, and a lot of that is due to, I think, the unfairness of the snake draft. And if there's ever a case for why the snake draft needs to disappear, it's this. She gets Antonio Brown, obviously the consensus number 1 pick, great pick, and then has to wait 22 more picks to go again. That's a long time. You're missing out on a lot, especially when you take a wide receiver. That leads to some weaker running backs, which only get weaker when she has this very strange Justin Forsett situation, which is very up in the air lately. I don't know. What do you guys see?
I mean, yeah, I've been there, but at the same time, I mean, I like this because you do get that bam bam for your second and third round pick. You kind of have to go for it. You can't necessarily take the safe picks. But I do like the bang bang.
Yeah. But looking
Okay.
at her squad, do you think it hurt her?
Yes.
I think taking Sammy Watkins hurt her.
She's gonna reach through the screen and punch you at that comment, but all right.
Well, I hate to say this though. Any Homer pick, I always disagree with. You're always making a poor choice whenever you go Homer. C.J. Anderson is one of those other ones that for some reason is living. There's been a whole season that's shown him underperforming, and for some reason he seems to be back in the picture. It's one of these other ones where it's like DeMarco Murray. I can't buy it. I saw a year where they looked terrible.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think C.J. Anderson's going to have a big year. You look at Kubiak; he generally produces good fantasy running backs, and they really, I mean, they're going to want to run. He's healthy. He wasn't healthy at the beginning of last year. When he did get healthy, he did look better. So I think, I mean, she's got Spencer Ware, who I think is going to end up being the starter for Kansas City.
Wow.
Wow.
That's
Hot
a bold
take.
prediction.
That's a hot take. Hot take right there, my friend.
That is. That's huge. And that brings us nicely into the number 8 team. And one of the reasons that I slid her in there, and she's sitting in the other room, she's actually pretty pleased with number 8, I'd have to say. That would be my wife, Joelle. And the big reason I think that she's going to slide down is twofold. Number 1, Charles has a lot of uncertainty around him. He's an incredibly fantastic player who sadly our winning team last year had, and he busted up his knee and missed a lot of the year. And then there was the little quarterback snafu in the draft of the first round where she still ended up with a very good quarterback, but not the one she wanted. And that was a great deal thanks to my son and his lovely manipulation of the columns. So there's the downside for her, I would have to say. But on the upside, with this Forsett thing, she could have ended up with an extra starting running back with West. I don't know for sure, but it's certainly possible. She got some solid receivers, great tight end, great defense. It could be interesting to see. She's going to have to make a move at kicker. We see that for sure.
He'll get picked up. But again, you said solid receivers. Sanders. I had this debate in another draft I was in. Again, with not knowing what exactly is going on with Denver and their quarterback.
True.
It's hard to say he's going to get the same volume. He's going to be, he's going to be a favorite target. And then with Jeffrey, I mean, you're never going to know if he's going to play. With the new injury rules, he's just going to be questionable every week.
Well, potential to be a star when he plays.
Oh,
Without
absolutely. I mean, if he plays and he's healthy, I mean, top 2 wide receiver who
hmm
get the ball, because I mean Cutler loves him,
Loves
but
him.
I absolutely don't trust his hamstring.
Fair. Mike, what do you see?
I like the team. Again, there's a little bit of struggle at running back. One of the things with Cincinnati, it's one of these deals where I just feel that every single year you think that you know whether they're going to go with Hill or Bernard. For some reason, it usually seems that we start off with Hill on the higher end of it. And then at some point during the year, it seems to be Bernard, especially in passing situations. If he could pay off, it would really help running back because the Abdullah one is another one of these ones where I heard so much about him and it just didn't pan out. And I understand he was taking a little bit more towards the end, so you had to.
I also noticed that every time you say that, these are guys that personally affected you last year.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, I think that a lot of times, though, with that being said, you have a guy, you were hot on him, you spent the pick on him, maybe a little bit earlier than you should have.
Okay, but
and it doesn't pan out for you, and you're one of the ones who sat there and watched him play often because you said, "Oh, he's on my fantasy team."
yeah, but you can't trust the fantasy rookie. I mean, as much as you want to, especially someone like him who was kind of like he didn't come in with the pedigree of Elliott. You know, he was kind of like, oh, you know, later round, and like, oh, but then the buzz started during training camp, and then he's like, oh, it became the hot trendy pick, and he had that one big game, and then nothing.
Yes.
Just like Melvin Gordon, I think he had a terrible year last year. There was a lot of hype about him. I think he's going to have a much better year this year, but I think a lot of people will look at him as a bust because of the year he had last year.
I see the possibility.
All right. All sounds good. I agree. I'll be curious to see those second-year running backs. I do think that makes a big difference for them. Coming in at number 7, rounding out the bottom half, I have Rich. Looking at Rich, he's got a star QB with Wilson, who puts up great numbers with the passing and running combo. He's got incredibly injury-prone running backs. Carlos Hyde has to fall into the category of always projected to do great, Mike, that was just referencing. And Thomas Rawls, though he looked good, was getting hurt a lot and then already got hurt a few times in preseason. So that's the area where I think he's deficient. But he really stars with some excellent wide receivers, a good tight end when healthy. His flex positions are a little up in the air, but he's got a couple good bench players, got a good backup QB, and he's got a couple rookies on his team in the wide receiver position that may be able to step in and help out in the flex.
Russell Wilson has been top 5 quarterback the past 3 years, somewhere around there.
Yeah, he was number 3 last year.
And I know that. I know the numbers. I know the rushing. I know the high completion. I always think he's going to fail, and I don't really know why. But I love the Tyler Boyd pickup. I think that'll help him. His flex with John Brown. I think there's a good chance he'll end up being the number 1 receiver in Arizona when the season's over.
It would help if Palmer stayed healthy there.
Of course.
That would be one of the ones where I have him in a league. I could see it. It's just that Palmer makes me worried because he's one of these guys who's strung together a little bit of healthy time. But if you really look into his career, I mean, there's just been some disastrous seasons.
Yeah.
And
Beckham.
Go ahead, man.
Beckham Jr. Over under on suspended for 1 game this season.
Take the over.
He plays Josh Norman twice, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's
You know, and I agree with you. He's another one of the ones that you were saying it about Wilson, who you're saying hasn't, for some reason you have this funny feeling in your head that might not perform well.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason with me, and I almost can't explain it, to me that's Beckham. I could see him coming off and having a blah year. I don't know why, and I know you're going to say he's an incredible athlete. He His hands are impeccable. He's going to be fed the ball from Eli. I could just see it not going well.
Yep. Well,
I think
I
it's
love him.
upstairs is where that's coming from. If you were to ask me,
I love him so much ever since that one year he won me the league and made the greatest catch in the history of mankind. So I will never speak an ill will towards him.
But now
That brings us to the top half.
You picked him up, what, like week 6, though? Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very late. He wasn't playing the first 4 weeks with a hamstring injury.
yeah. And he was on the team originally, but then he was dropped and then picked up. Went back and forth a couple times, right?
And it just goes to show you just never know. That was a fluke win for me, but I'll take it. So, to the top 6.
okay, sir.
This was tough. When you got up into this point, I mean, all of these were tough because, there's so much uncertainty, of course. But this got real tough because there's a lot of really good teams, with so many squads splitting time between running backs, and there's so many good receivers and enough good quarterbacks to go around that the rankings got a little challenging here. So my 6th one was Brian, and looking at Brian, he has some incredible top-tier talent when you look at his positions. He's got the number 1 quarterback. He's got a stud running back in Gurley. He's got a stud wide receiver in Green. He's got a great tight end in Reed. He's got the number 1 defense from last year. All those are fantastic. The rest has a lot of potential outside of Frank Gore, I think. But there's uncertainty to it. Golden Tate stepping into the wide receiver 1 role. I don't know how he does. He was open, but he was always being covered by the number 2 guy in Detroit. Crabtree's a toss-up. Kevin White, maybe he's good, maybe he's not. We don't know. Cutler's throwing to him. And there's really very little running back depth unless he gets a hit with Henry, which I know you think is going to be the case, Tamala, and I know he's banking on too. So good-looking squad.
Well, considering the Murray situation, as I described earlier, I think this is a really good team. Frank Gore, again, one of the ones that last year was just so disappointing that it's hard to believe. What I feel it's starting to show is how thin this running back, being able to get a running back who you think could perform, how it is throughout fantasy.
Okay, but I believe Frank Gore finished as a top 15 running back last year.
I had him on the squad.
I think you may have.
Oh, no, yeah, I had him on a team too, and he played terrible. But
he was awful, and he was painful to watch. He was in the top 12. He busted in for a couple 20-point games. I believe that's where it came from. But in between, he was so up and down. So he'd have a 20 and a 15 and a 20 and a 15, and then he'd have a 5 and a 3 and a 4 and a 3. And I don't know. He was always leaving with injuries, but he played every week. So it's hard to argue. You're right, Tamala. He was number 12. Maybe Brian's onto something, and I'm just holding the bias here, but he just seems old to me.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with you, Golden Tate. I mean, the games when Johnson was injured, he stepped in and he had monster games.
I could see it.
And then Jim Bob Cooter. I mean,
you just wanted to say the name. That's all you did there.
I did. And Jordan Reed, I don't think he can go 5 games without getting hurt.
Number 3 tight end last year, still, even with all those injuries.
This is true, but they did draft a couple receivers. I think
fair. Listen, it's a good squad. Like I said, everybody's good.
Solid, very solid.
It's solid.
Very
and
solid.
I do drink the Kool-Aid and Jordan Reed. That's the one that I'll say.
I do. I think he's good. I think he's good. Tough to keep him healthy, but he's good. Yeah. And then, just for the spiteful fact that I can't remember whose name is where, I went ahead and put Colin next. Or was it Brian? I don't know. When I was looking at Colin's squad, he's got a real good-looking squad already. And then there is some future potential that I did not take into account right now, because if I did take into account what was possible, sorry for my dog drinking water in the background there, I think he would have been ranked even higher. Looking at Brady and Gordon, he's got some real solid backup running backs. He's got the Miami, Green Bay, and Minnesota backup. Questionable call going with a backup defense. You don't see that strategy too often.
I'm not out on that.
But I love Peterson and Lacey is a pretty awesome 1-2 punch if Lacey stays healthy. Nelson is undervalued because of his injury. He was a monster. He was a number one receiver a couple years ago. Decker's real good. Olsen's fantastic. Fleener, I don't think he'll be in there too long. It's weird to see 2 tight ends, but I also just want to make a quick note. This is the single whitest squad I have ever seen. From Fleener to Olsen to Decker to Nelson to Dalton to Bailey. That is a 80% white rate.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, JT, because if I remember correctly, never mind, I won't share. I do like his team. The Lacey one, he's another one of those ones that I feel probably gained 30, 40 pounds after college. Probably needs to year. It's a contract year, and he kind of needs to put up or shut up. He goes up and down. If you hit on him, he could be absolute money. He's vicious around the goal line. I think he needs to take off a little bit of that gut that I saw. No one's going to convince me that he didn't pack on a ton of pounds. But if he could take that out and look like he did when he left Alabama, amazing.
It's true. I think Colin's big problem is his flex positions, like you were talking about with Fleener, the second tight end. And then Diggs, who knows what's going on in Minnesota with the quarterback. I want to make
sure. They got Bradford. They're great.
You know how that goes. Who has the same exact numbers as Mark Sanchez, who got released.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy we got a first-round pick for him.
Yeah.
I feel
he's got Josh Gordon on his bench to, after the suspension. But, that's not taking into account buys and I almost am one of these people who, if you wanted to convince me right now, you could easily convince me that Josh Gordon will never play another game in the NFL. And I think it's legitimate. I think he's an incredibly talented player. I remember him in Baylor. I was just, oh my God, who's that guy? But if you're going to convince me that he screwed up this badly and that this isn't going to continue, I'm just not buying it.
Johnny Manziel's off the team. Gordon's got a new path in life. That's all it took. Just get rid of Money Manziel. Really, though, I went back and forth on putting Colin and Brian. I could have flip-flopped those two.
Yes.
2 real good-looking squads there that are easily going to be in the top half of the preseason rankings. And that brought me to my not quite as high of a reverse jinx, but with the same intention here for Mr. Mike Scarano coming in at number 4. Looking at his squad, and hey, I liked his squad last year too, and we all saw where that got us. But at least for now, he's got some real solid workhorses. And when I say workhorses, that means I look at running backs that are going to be getting the ball almost every down, and there's not a lot of those. So when I see Ingram and Langford, both of whom, at least what I read right now, are going to be 3-4 down backs, that's rare. So I love seeing those guys.
And I'm a little weary on the Langford one. I will admit that. It was one of the ones that I had to take at that point. It was a good value at the point where I got him. I hope he pays off.
Yeah.
I think he'll be solid for at least the first couple weeks, and then if he's not performing or he's performing like he did at the end of the season, I think they'll have issues. But I also don't think they would have let Forte go if they weren't comfortable with him.
And I'm hoping that I could hit on at least an Ingram or Yeldon. If one of those can hit for me.
You mean Gordon?
Yeah, my mistake. I completely apologize. If I can hit on Gordon or Yeldon, if I could just hit on one of them and one of those guys could just become that featured back. I took a bit of a gamble on each one, and if one could do it, I'm money.
I think you're going to be better off with Gordon. Ingram, I think he'll have some solid weeks. He's not an injury-prone player, but he gets some weird injuries.
And the thing is that Gordon was never used around the goal line situations. It prevented him from getting any touchdowns at all. I would say this. I think that my 2 wide receivers that I'm rolling with right now are 2 of the strongest in the league.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, with Allen Robinson and Julio. I can't see much better than that.
You're not beating that. You got to keep Julio healthy, and you got 2 good wide receivers. potentially on your bench that are rookies. So
Well, I like, and the one I'm really hot on actually right now is the Sterling Shepard one particularly. Again, that kind of goes by to my not buying the Kool-Aid on Odell and not drinking the Kool-Aid on him. It leads me to believe that Sterling Shepard, he's looked good in the preseason, and I could just see teams all shifting their coverage towards Odell Beckham and Shepard getting some really good looks. Victor Cruz is another one that I could believe. If you told me over under 3 games, I'd take the under that he plays less than 3 games this season. Hot take.
all right, hot take it is.
My hot take is Fuller will have a better season than Shepard.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
2
Fuller
good
was
ones.
drafted at what, 14?
Yeah.
I mean, almost
That's
seen as a
solid.
slight reach for the Texans. I don't know if the Osweiler character is going to pay off again. He sure made a lot of money based on what I would say slightly suspect performance, but I'd like to see
Sophomore
it.
campaign again. Sophomore
Again,
campaign.
a similar situation where is the team going to start shifting their coverage towards Hopkins? He might get some looks.
Fair. And that brings us to our top 3. And if you're paying attention, much like a draft lottery, you know who those 3 teams are. And the one I have at number 3 is myself, which I'm sure no one will ever disagree with. As mentioned last week, I haven't made.
Before we go on further with
Oh, yeah,
your
go ahead.
team, when did you change your name? Like, I honestly looked at your team like an hour ago.
5 minutes before we started the podcast.
Really? That is a somewhat hot take, guys, but that's fine. Go ahead, JT.
I have a major weakness at tight end. I don't feel great about either one, Ebron or Martellus Bennett. Ebron's supposedly healthy. We'll see. And the same thing goes for Matt Jones. I just read a report about half hour ago that said that he is good to go practicing, and that would be
I heard
big
that as
for
well,
me.
actually.
I feel like I've got some pretty good depth, some good backups. If Forte goes down, I got that backup. If Murray goes down, I got that backup out in Oakland. I'm a little worried about my Devontae Parker pick. I love him. I was really high on him, and then he just really became a bust preseason-wise. There's plenty of chance for him to come back. When I look through my team, I feel like there's a lot of B pluses and only 1 A in DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think anybody else really qualifies as a legitimate 100% A, but those B pluses kind of round out to a fairly solid all-around squad.
I'm going to tell you what I like about your team, JT, and if I were to give you the best compliment, you have 2 quarterbacks that I feel have the most upside. Bortles, of course, was a stud last year, even though a lot of people don't realize it, and some of the yards were garbage. But I'm hot on Winston this year. I don't see the sophomore slumps coming. I see a couple of those interceptions going away. Did you know he ran in 6 touchdowns last year?
I did. I had him in my other league, and I enjoyed watching him, especially in the second half of the year when he really started to get it together. The key to that is Mike Evans forgetting that his hands, have fingers. That would be a problem that he could get over. And Vincent Jackson staying on the field. Doug Martin being great would be awesome. I'm a little nervous about riding Jacksonville and Tampa Bay as 2 squads that are going to mean a lot to me.
I think your biggest problem, JT, though, is the consistency of your team. I mean, Martin, Cooper, Ebron, Jones, they all have the ability to put up huge games, and at some point during the season, I'm sure they will. But at the same time, they'll give you weeks when they give you like a 3, and it's just killer.
And they're tough not to play, so that's why you end up getting burned by it.
And Ebron's a slight roll of the dice. I could see him doing well because he's kind of the tall, bigger target now that Calvin's gone. You'd like to think high draft status was great when he was at UNC.
You've been hearing that about him for years.
Just like Ryan Matthews, as I would say. It's a very similar situation. Seems to have the potential to have everything you want, but for some reason, fools you each time.
I think if you have some injuries, well placed. I think if Gronk goes down, hopefully, knock on wood, that won't happen. Latavius.
If Brady comes back and Bennett's the number 1 tight end there, that's massive because he was really good in Chicago.
Tight end
He
seems
seems
to be-
redundant in New England.
Tight end seems to be a position that every once in a while, though, just on the waiver wire, one could just fall from the sky. I remember Barnage fell to me in one league and just absolutely dominated for a little while. It was one of the reasons I won that league. So, and it just fell in my lap. He had one big season. I used the waiver pick, and bam! I mean, you had he was for a while. You were rolling. I was rolling with the second or third best tight end in the league just off the waiver wire. So keep an eye. I think you're fine.
Yeah, I mean, especially Belichick. I mean, he likes to play the matchups where he has an advantage, and he'll get a way to get Bennett into.
Oh yeah.
My only question is the first couple weeks of the season, with Brady not being there, keeping him in for more of pass protection.
And it will. Right. And that was one of Belichick's full ideas was always I think it was particularly a reaction for when there was Revis and the Cromartie, and they were very physical cornerbacks. He said, "Oh, I'll just play 2 tight ends."
And hopefully I don't have to find out for a while. I certainly don't have any interest in playing Bennett with Garoppolo right now, but we'll see Ebron's health. So that brings us to the top 2. And I know Tamala's dying to see where I stuck him, so this will tell him where he is. I have Jake coming in at number 2.
Can we stop for a second?
Oh, yeah, what's up?
Rachel is chatting on the live page.
Uh-oh.
And,
man, I didn't think she was going to listen. Oh, man.
Like the NFL estimates the Bills, me and Tyrod can go to Disney together in February.
Yeah, that's her virtual punch to the face of you for the Sammy Watkins comment, I would imagine.
Might be.
Hey, listen, if she succeeds with Tyrod, then in the end, I think at least, 2/3 of us also succeed here with her, and I will take that if that's the trade-off that needs to happen. We'll see. Team number 2, Jake. I'm looking over Jake's squad, and I was drafting directly after Jake, and it really sucked for me because we were very much on the same wavelength, so I'm sure that's my own bias sneaking in due to the fact that I was thinking like that. But he's got wide receiver studs all over the place.
Incredible depth there, actually.
A lot of depth there, and he's got some running back bench depth, too. There's some guys there that may end up becoming starters or stepping in. If his big man goes down, if Devonta Freeman goes down, he's got the backup. Last year, Casey won the league because Jake had Tevin Coleman, and then he didn't have Freeman, and Casey picked him up off the waiver wire. So he's got that covered. He's got 2 star quarterbacks. I love Derek Carr. Kirk Cousins put up really good numbers, surprisingly, last year. As much as
I'm hotter on Carr this year, but it's very, very good. And I could see Lamar Miller being your surprise number 1 running back in the league. I'm just saying, a lot of upside there. I could see him doing very, very well.
Yeah, I like his team. I think his biggest concern is, these wide receivers. They're stars, but Cobb is an injury concern. Fitzgerald is definitely getting older, but he's got a couple guys that can step in. He just picked up Dorsett that you dropped, Tamala, so he's got Bernard in there too.
That always makes you nervous when you drop a player and he gets picked up right away. But okay, Freeman's going to drop off from where he was last year. His second half of the season wasn't nearly as good as the first. I don't necessarily think he will lose the starting job, but he won't have the year he had last year. Ertz, every year you're like, oh, Ertz is going to have a big year. He's going to have a big year. Still waiting for it.
That's his weak spot if there is one for sure.
Yeah. But I love his depth at wide receiver, and I just think that those two – I could see Freeman not doing as well as he did last year, but, man, he's a stud. Especially I love the handcuff with Coleman because Coleman was going to be their starter. So I'm digging it. I dig the team. I give it a thumbs up.
Yeah, solid. Very solid.
Solid. It's solid, and I really like Lamar Miller. I'm telling you, everyone, keep an eye on him for being one of the top running backs in the league this year. I was targeting him.
I was going to take him with the next pick, and Jake snagged him right from me. I was furious. All right, Tamales, so my reverse jinx goes out to you this year.
Thank you.
This did not pan out well last year, my friend. I'm going to just make things
the hope. That's the hope. But in the true spirit of this ranking, for week 1, I don't think there's a stronger squad out there. I don't know how long that lasts when D'Angelo drops down. But for you to have D'Angelo right now, we saw how good he was when he stepped in for Bell. That gives you 4 starting running backs. And you are the only person in the league that has 4 starting running backs. And yes, it's a passing league, and yes, the wide receivers are important. But some of that stuff, the passing is the stuff that clicks in a little later, and running backs tend to get those goal line touchdowns a little more consistently than the running backs, than the wide receivers do. So it's a great running back set. I like your wide receivers very much. This may be a controversial take. I think your weakest point is your quarterback. Matt Stafford is an asshole, and that's all there is to it.
He's cussing right on the video.
Yeah, and he lost his best player, and your Jim Bob, Joe Bob, Cooter Bob, or whatever is all good
Jim
and well.
Bob Cooter.
Sorry, can't get that one right. But I don't know where that lies. But in the end, you could have Terrell Pryor step in at quarterback, so you'll be just fine.
Well, but I will also say this is what he does have. Last year, Bell did not pay off at all, and it was D'Angelo. And I remember towards the end of the year being somewhat mocked by a certain company when I was saying D'Angelo was a top 5 back, and he clearly was when you look at the numbers. I played D'Angelo all 3 weeks. I wouldn't think one thing of it. I'd sit out the other running backs. I think he's fantastic, and I could see this. I could see when Bell comes back, I could see a split and carry situation actually taking place. There's someone who I've never quite drank the Kool-Aid on.
No, I don't see him splitting carries with Bell. Although I do see Bell getting hurt at some point during the year.
I see that more likely.
Well, there's that one then. When I say not drink the Kool-Aid, I just one that I'm just not quite buying into.
So I think
the last 2 years.
I think you got a lot going for you right now, but there is, just like with every squad, there is the pitfalls. You've got the Gronk, everybody diving at his knees, the big question mark of Arian Foster, the idea of owning a Cleveland Browns running back, Mike Evans forgetting how to catch a ball, D'Angelo Williams getting benched, David Johnson stepping into the lead role. I mean, all of these things are question marks, but
David
at least
Johnson,
as of right now,
I would say is probably the one that he has the least question about.
Yeah,
That's
I would agree.
Completely.
I would agree. As of right now, I don't see a squad that tops that in terms of just straight up depth, top to bottom. And I hope you lose every game.
Thank you. As long as I win week 1.
This has not panned out well in the past, Jamal. I will tell you this.
So yeah, with that in mind, guys, be prepared for these rankings to flip-flop majorly next week when I'm sure I'm born out to look like a complete fool.
Anytime for a hot take by me, real quick. You'll love it.
Oh yeah, hit it up, hot take.
I'm going to see points, and this one goes out to Casey. Mark Sanchez will have more fantasy points than Dak Prescott and Sam Bradford combined. Hot take. Love it, Casey. The Sanchez. Bringing it back.
I don't even know what to say to that.
All right, Jay, continue on.
That's it, man. That's all I got. You guys got any final thoughts other than that?
Nope.
Next week, do we want to bring in a guest to help us with our rankings?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to have people on at any point.
Because I believe Haley wants to come on.
I love it.
So.
Yeah.
Love it.
Rachel,
I'd be more than happy to pass the mantle over. Though you have to let her know she can't rank only Bills players in the top 12.
And then
I see them having a potential top 5 draft pick this year, but that's another hot take that I should have saved.
Oh, jeez, buddy. You're stoking the fire.
All right, gentlemen. Are we going to call it a night here?
I think we're going to call it a night. We'll be back next week to re-look at the rankings and kind of go over. We can do a little less talk about the rankings, obviously, since we're not getting into squads, and we can instead get into just where they at. And I want to talk first week. Set your lineups. Game Thursday.
Excellent. Excited about it.
One last thing, guys. There is the DraftKings League that we're running.
I signed up. I made a roster.
Yeah. We need another 4 people in order to play.
How much?
What?
How much?
You
Free.
made it free.
Oh,
Got to
okay.
put a little money in there to make it fun.
I have a little bit of a degenerate gambling problem, and
A
No.
little bit.
by you.
All right, guys. I look forward to next week, and we'll see you.
All right.
Till next time.
Have a good night.
Signing off.